even his own people are beginning to question, why did Russia invade Ukraine? Now is the time that they're the weakest. So the world has an opportunity now to defeat that mentality. Defeating them now would bring Eastern Europe into the 21st century economic powerhouse.
Hi, this is a new episode of War Chronicles with Tatiana Popova. Today I will interview a veteran, ex-Special Forces officer, Lieutenant Colonel Perry Blackburn. He will share his opinion about Ramstein 3, assess the military operations and speed of the delivery of weapons to Ukraine.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So first question is Ramstein 3. What will Ukraine get from this meeting from your point of view?
Well, I think Ukraine has an opportunity to leverage the success that they're having right now against the Russians and what they've been able to do and show the world what Ukraine brings to the table. And by that, I mean, you have to, if you come to these type of meetings, you need to come with some level of strength. And so that strength is going to prevail in these meetings. So what we would hope happens is that all the supplies and armament and the promises that people have made will come through, and that's my hope for these meetings. And I'm sure is what they're going to go into, looking to leverage their strength to make sure that all these promises that everybody admitted to, they start fulfilling those promises, including real sanctions against Russia for their war crimes.
When you speak about keeping promises, you mean the promises of delivering some artillery, some weapon which was promised by different government?
I mean everything from the economic promises to the military promises to the humanitarian to the humanitarian promises. The world has an opportunity right now to fulfill their obligations to a country that's at war against an invading force. So those promises that we've heard throughout this period of time that Ukraine has been at war with Russia, it's time for these countries to fulfill those promises. Artillery pieces, military pieces, equipment needs to happen now. There's no time to wait. We can't. We can't continue these conversations and meetings and discussions to fulfill these promises. Do it. This is what needs to happen to continue the success that Ukraine is having.
Atrocities in Bucha, Irpin, Matizhin, are these episodes is the essence of the Russian army for these acts, but Putin even did the contrary. He even awarded the title of Guardiskaya to those who did these terrible things. This is the state policy of destroying Ukrainians, or it's something else?
Oh, I think it's the state policy. I don't think this is anything new for what we've been, we've learned about Russia over time, including the invasion in Crimea. I think if you look at it from that lens and you look at it from their past history, and that Putin continues to bring up their past history as a foundation for their invasion in the Ukraine, then it's not surprising that these things have happened for me. What's surprising to me is that he hasn't been put on trial for war crimes. We should have learned, the world should have learned from the 40s and the 50s, and we're now in 2022, that we don't need to wait for all the evidence to be gathered. We have enough evidence right now to try him for war crimes, including the the individuals inside of Ukraine that committed these war crimes, even if it's an absentia. Um, and I think if this would have happened, it would put notice to the rest of the world, countries that are either supporting Russia or a proxy of Russia or informally supporting them. Um, this activity, this criminal activity, this indiscriminate killing of Ukrainians, has got to not only be illuminated to the world, but has to be proved. And to do that, a Hague-like convention trying him for war crimes would be the best method in my mind to do that and and absolutely stop the atrocities that are occurring in Ukraine by the Russians.
No. It looks like that main goal of Kremlin in this war is destruction of Ukraine, total destruction. Then won't be any peace agreement, conditionally the Minsk III, be only a temporary truce, enabling the Russian Federation to gather power again and do third aggression. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I think part of that is the I grew up in the Cold War era, and this is what we learned tactically the Russians would do because they really don't have a military strategy or operational really an operational mindset on how to conduct a war. So most of what they do is total destruction of infrastructure and trying to get the community or the towns or the cities to capitulate and surrender. I think this is why Ukraine has been so successful is that first of all that you got the perfect leader at the perfect time in Ukraine that has rallied the Ukrainian people. And then also I think the Russians are surprised that Ukrainians are putting up such a defense and fight against them. They really thought that they would destroy these cities and then be able to march in and walk in and have complete control, and that's not happening tactically. So that then disrupts their operational and strategic, whatever little they have, plans. Mm-hmm. So what needs to continue to happen is that effort by the Ukrainian needs to continue to happen, and as this moves forward, if there's any opportunity for a peace agreement or a truce, it would be on the terms that the Ukrainians would have strength. I go back to this, as a country, leveraging their strength to produce the results they want in a truce and or a peace agreement, which would mean I'm sure that Russia would have to leave Ukraine as a sovereign nation.
Yeah, let's hope.
I think it's possible. I think absolutely possible. The people of Ukraine are just they're very strong people. They're good people. You can tell. I mean, just my time here is they love life, liberty, and they want to pursue their own dreams and happiness, and they don't. It's not going to be under the leadership or governance or whatever of Russia. It's going to be with Ukrainians.
All the ultimatums put forward by Putin, all the talks about the threats to the Russian Federation of NATO expansion to the east, and so those were excuses that are now discarded by Kremlin itself. Both Putin, Medvedev, and all others, they are saying now that main goal in this war is destruction of Ukraine as anti-Russia, as overall, and further territorial expansion, which will continue to Poland, Baltic states, maybe even Scandinavia. At least they're making such threats constantly. Based on this, does it mean that any agreements and attempts to save Putin's face are only postponement of the next phase of next war? Therefore, am I right if I understand it that way, that only one option for Ukraine and for Europe to win in this war and even to stop Russia from this expansion is to win?
So let's take the first part of your question, and that is his lies. So if one lie doesn't work, try another lie. So that's what we've heard from the beginning, and now I think even his own people are beginning to question, why did Russia invade Ukraine? What is the real reason behind it? And he's given many reasons and then many lies, and then turns around and completely tells something, a different story. So none of that seems to be working. I believe now is the time to defeat the Kremlin, the old guard, the Russians. Now is the time that they're the weakest. And because they not only are they the weakest because of what they've done in attacking Ukraine or invading Ukraine, a sovereign country, but because of the reasoning they did it is so weak. So the world has an opportunity now to defeat that mentality and bring Russia, the country of the people, to the 21st century and really change the entire dynamics of Eastern Europe. But it's not going to happen if we continue to allow, and I mean we as in the world, continues to allow Russia with its false narrative and lies to continue to invade Ukraine and or bully other countries in not supporting Ukraine and looking further out than Ukraine and possibly invading other countries. The world needs no more example from Russia of its bad behavior and its desire to control more of Eastern Europe. We see it. So now's the time again to change that. Defeating them now would bring Eastern Europe into the 21st century and be an economic powerhouse with technology and commerce, because there's so much richness in the region, and there's so much that Ukrainians and Ukraine itself can now bring the world, because the world sees Ukraine in a different light. And I truly believe this. I've looked at this from all angles, and I know it seems, it could be a lot more complicated than what it seems, but it really isn't. It gets down to the people, and it's time for the people to be free in both Russia and in Russia-occupied areas of Ukraine, and the world would be a better place. The world would definitely be a better place without them.
As a result of active assistance with weapons from West and we hope and we trust, we believe a victory of Ukraine, a new very strong stronghold of security appears in Ukraine, the Ukrainian army, which at the moment is the most combat experienced and combat ready in Europe. Does this make it possible to deter potential aggressor, the same Russian Federation, in the future, and organize like a security belt for the European Union? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, if this war ends where neither side has a complete victory, then I think you are looking at what the security belt would look like, and how Ukraine would then tie in with NATO and or just tie in with other European countries to ensure the security of it. What we don't want to happen is another Berlin Wall, right? And from either side, uh, and you could almost see that occurring because of the rhetoric that Putin has against other European nations that are bordered with Ukraine. So it's in the best interest of all Europe to help Ukraine and push Russia back out of the sovereign nation of Ukraine, and then win this thing without having to worry about the additional security apparatuses to forever be in fear of another Russian invasion. So again, I go back to this needs to be won now. It doesn't need to be a frustrated ending where neither party has a decisive victory. And then there's always this looming Cold War attitude again for the next 50 years that does nothing good to enhance the economic commerce and technology and the advances that needs to happen in Eastern Europe.
Скажем так. And how timely are the arms deliveries in general now? How do you see? Is it going in time, or there is some, like, everything is a bit too late? What is your opinion?
Everything's too late. It's too slow. It's too late. President of the United States is too slow. He's too late. The other nations are too slow. They're too late. There's just this really lack of a sense of urgency on these world leaders, and most of these world leaders, unfortunately, are probably encumbered more by their politics than they are by doing what's right. And this, I think, is what we're seeing with the half measures that have been put forth. The sanctions, for example, they're half measures. There's nothing really that they've done to absolutely cripple Russia in this effort for them to invade Ukraine fully. So I think they need, hopefully this meeting will help urge them to move faster with better equipment. And it's not all about just the funding. I know the U.S. just passed a bill for $40 billion, but okay, well, where is the equipment that comes with that? Where is the support, those supplies and mechanisms that we need now, not to work through the process, but to make it happen now. And I think they're just too slow.
So we saw this list of deliveries which is planned or agreed, and it's usually like Stingers, Javelins, HIMARS, artillery, but not at all about anti-air, anti-missile system, the missile defense systems, or aviation. Why?
I think part of that is the technology and the training that's required to use those systems. Having been associated with those systems, I know that it takes a while to understand those systems and to use them effectively. And so that process will take a long time with using anti-aircraft, air defense artillery systems and the radar systems that are associated with them. That's going to take a while. So what would enhance that package is that the people come with the equipment, which will take an entirely different agreement. But again, from my perspective, I think it needs to happen. I don't think that's another example of a half measure. Here's a piece of equipment, we'll train you on it in a short period of time and you can go out and use it. Well, here's some other equipment that takes a lot longer to use and a lot different level of expertise to use that may take you a year to learn how to use that equipment effectively. Because if used incorrectly, it could have some catastrophic effects against the civilian population. So that needs it. The people need to come with that equipment. The other equipment that you're talking about, Stingers and some of the drones and artillery pieces, can be trained in a few weeks and moved out on the battlefield with Ukrainians, with and through Ukrainians, working that effort. So that needs to be a separate agreement, and maybe could be worked out here. And a country or some countries would be willing to do that. Bring the people with the equipment to utilize it for the air defense of Ukraine.
Stoltenberg, actually today, but I said in the program yesterday, because program will be broadcasted tomorrow. He said that Stoltenberg said that Ukrainian army will be transferred to NATO weapon standard. What does it mean?
Well, I think what it really means, first of all, is you have to look at your training and how you conduct that training. What doctrine do you use so that your tactics, your techniques, and your procedures fit in with other countries? For example, Russian doctrine and Russian tactics. That's what they do within themselves. U.S. has doctrine, NATO has doctrine, and we all operate on the same level. So those two differences, if we bring Ukraine into that, Ukraine would be a NATO U.S. doctrine-like army with their tactics, techniques, and procedures. Again, isolating Russia militarily with their archaic tactics, which we see as nothing more than just indiscriminate missile attacks on civilian occupied areas in cities. Where U.S. and NATO is definitely a lot more willing to just attack military installations, and any type of collateral damage we take very, very serious. That is a huge difference in the doctrine in both Russia and U.S. and Ukraine. And I think Ukraine has gone more toward the U.S. doctrine and NATO doctrine in their efforts to wage a counteroffensive against Russia.
Question about Lend-Lease. As far as I understand, it will start only from next financial year, so it means from 1st of October. Why it's so, not new fiscal year in US, why it's so long, and why it's so, how it will influence delivering of weapons to Ukraine?
So it's just another great example of how slow the rest of the world is in an emergency like this. And it's not only to their slowness, the United States slow to respond, but it's slow to equip and react and fulfill their promises. Lend-Lease should not have to wait till the next fiscal year, which is 1 October. Lend-Lease could occur at any time and should occur. And essentially, it's a function where military equipment is leased, sold, or managed by the U.S. military and then given over to a foreign country. And we have those agreements in place all over the world. This is nothing new. It's nothing that we have to reinvent. We could do it. We should and be able to do it now, because it would then give the Ukrainians the equipment they need quicker, and their agreements would be made formally to put the equipment in the hands of Ukrainians that need it now and not later, so they don't have to go through this legal process. And that's where we're at right now, is everybody wanting to wait for the next fiscal year, but it's unnecessary.
Mm-hmm. European leaders like Macron, Scholz, and Draghi, as you know, they will be in Ukraine this week, as far as I understand, almost very soon. They push Ukraine to negotiate with Putin. Macron made a statement about it, Draghi made a statement, Scholz made different statements about that. It so-called Minsk III, with possible loss of today occupied territories. What do you think? Should Ukraine and Ukrainian government go for it, or should we still proceed and try to make free, which means keep alive our people on today occupied territories?
Well, I think they should be pushing Putin to negotiate, not pushing the president of Ukraine. Uh, First of all, I think it's for them to push Lewinsky there to the president to sue for peace is not in the best interest of Ukraine. The best interest of Ukraine is going back to the strength that Ukraine has right now. I mean, Ukraine is positioned better than Russia is because they're fighting from a position of strength. So really, the world should be pushing Putin to do it. I mean, if Putin's not going to do it, why should Ukraine give up their sovereign territory for a bully, essentially, that was unprovoked in his attacks against Ukraine? So Ukraine has the strength, not Russia. Russia should be the ones that are being pushed to sue for peace. So I believe that the president of Ukraine is absolutely thinking along the same terms. I don't think he's willing to give up Ukraine, which includes the people, the heart and soul of the country, to Russia.
Mm-hmm.
It's ingenuous, right, to think that another country would ask another country to give up its people to an invading force.
Yeah.
It's just ingenuous for me to think that is something that would actually work in the long term anyway.
About nuclear threats. In almost all Russian main TV channels, they are keeping repeating these threats to Ukraine that they could use tactical weapons, they could use it in some centers of decision making or somewhere else. From one point of view, we have this Budapest Memorandum, which Russia totally broke. From another point of view, there are some verbal confirmation from Boris Johnson or from some US officials that if Russia will use a nuclear against Ukraine, they will receive answer. Should it be some official right guarantee or statement, like South Korea has, as far as I understand, some kind of such guarantees from United States? What it should be? Because me personally, living in Kyiv, we have constant rocket shelling, at least once per month. At least several rockets are going to Kyiv. But what it should be about nuclear threats? What is your opinion?
So it's interesting you should say that about the rocket attacks in Kyiv, and me too, staying in Kyiv, and even other cities in Ukraine. There's always the sirens that go off, right? The missile warnings, and it reminds me not of my real time in like Iraq and Afghanistan, but it really reminds me of my time in the U.S. as a child, and how we would have these bomb alerts, and the sirens would go off. And I grew up in Germany also, and we would have these missile warnings. So I know what that's like, and it was because of Russia. Right, Russia with a nuclear attack, and we would get underneath our desks or go into the hallways and get into the basement. So living under those conditions in itself is stressful. Even, as as a family in the Ukraine, listening to these warnings that constantly go off with impending attack from missiles from Russia, which again are indiscriminate. Nobody knows where they're going to land or what's going to be in it, nuclear or otherwise. So yeah, absolutely, there should be a formal agreement. Um, the world should be really concerned that Russia has this capability that they could use, and that they're not willing to make a formal agreement, and they should be pressured into this, and for no other reason than the fact that any type of nuclear attack from Russia in the 21st century here would mean a catastrophic event inside of Russia also, not just where their missiles land. So for the people of Russia, they need to understand this too. Not only are the sirens going off in Ukraine, but those same sirens could be going off in Russia. And this is the last thing that I think anybody in the 21st century should be considering is a nuclear war. But here we are. Here we are. You have Putin, who is obviously unhinged at some level to conduct this unprovoked attack against Ukraine, and now he has the means to which to start a nuclear war. So yeah, they should have an agreement. I think the world should push it, and I think there's opportunity to leverage other countries that may not be that may be informally supporting Russia to help with that agreement, because it's not in their best interest either. China, for one, it's not in China's best interest for a nuclear war or an attack on either side. And I think that would be the beginning of figuring out a solution to this entire problem set that's created in Eastern Europe now due to the Russia's unprovoked attack.
So it was actually the call today, at least it was known today about this call between Putin and Xi Jinping, and only very short notice was in a Chinese press that they discuss questions about security. What does it mean? What it could mean for Ukraine? What is your opinion?
I think that really what it means to, I haven't heard it, I haven't read about it, but I think anytime that Putin reaches out to Russia, it's to ensure that, that Putin reaches out to China, it's to ensure China that Russia's doing the right thing, and to make sure that China is still supportive of them, because every day the support from Russia by other countries and by people of those countries is less and less. The longer this goes on, the less support Russia has from other countries and the people of those countries. And I believe that's what's happening also in China. At the end of the day, I think the Chinese people want to live relatively free also, without the worry or concern of a war. Their economy is pretty fragile with coming out of COVID, and now the outbreak of COVID, they've instituted some more restraints on the people. So the last thing they want is to have to be mired in a war that Russia got him into. So I think that's all that he's doing, is really trying to solidify that he still has support from these countries. Belarusian is another one, as they move forward, and the rest of the world and the people begin to wane in their support for him.
Thank you, Perry. That was a new episode of War Chronicles with Tatiana Popova. Today I interview a veteran, ex-Special Forces officer, Lieutenant Colonel Perry Blackburn. He shared his opinion about Ramstein 3, assessed the military operation and the speed of delivery of weapons to Ukraine. Thank you for your time.